All right. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's staying well and healthy. I'm looking forward to talking about building out lease renewals today. So we're going to be looking at lease renewal process in LeadSimple. I'm Zach again. Most of you probably have met me or at least seen me on the previous webinars. So I won't do a lot of an intro there, but that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So as you guys all hop on, we usually have about 5 minutes before to let everyone join, and you can just pipe up when you've joined and let us know where you're coming from, who you are, and that's always you're able to do that in the chat. And then also one thing I want to highlight for everybody at the beginning of the call, so everyone's jumping on, is at the bottom. There's the ability to ask a question, and I will be trying to take a little bit of a slower pace today. So I might stop in the middle to answer questions and not just wait till the end. We'll see how that goes. And we have a few people on the call as well monitoring the question area, so they might be able to answer in the chat while I'm continuing with the demo. So again, today, just make sure you're on the right webinar. We're going to be talking about building your lease renewal process within LeadSimple. So we have one built out that we're going to be going through and messing with. And overall, basically, it's important to keep in mind that we had to make it kind of generic, but we went into quite a bit of detail as well. So the steps and everything, and even what the stage names are called, things like that can definitely flux and change based on your business and how it works for you, particularly with regards to regulations, as well as when you trigger processes and when you start them out. So that's just something to keep in mind in general. We're going to wait a few more minutes to let people jump on before starting. We have quite a few people, but there's a few more jumping on. So we're going to wait for them, and then we'll kick things off. So feel free to pipe up in the chat. Let me know where you guys are coming from, and it's always fun. Helps build everyone be able to see. Awesome. Okay. There we go. Well, thanks, Sean. We definitely appreciate supporting, and the call yesterday was awesome. So, okay, just a little bit longer here, and then we're going to really dive in. I'm really excited about this process today because the lease renewal actually, it has so many different options, and particularly other processes that get triggered from it. So a lease renewal can very easily trigger an inspection. So you guys will kind of see how that could work. Make ready, which is fun, as well as work orders can be triggered. A move out could be triggered based on the tenant's response, or if the owner wants to relist the property. So there's a lot of moving pieces that the lease renewal kind of underlines. So that's why we are doing that. And a note as well, we're going to continue to do deep dives on different topics and different processes on these webinars on a weekly basis. So you can stay tuned and sign up for the ones that are most applicable to you. And then they're always recorded and sent after the call as well. So everyone knows that, which was something Claire asked in the chat. All right, it's 11:04. As my dad always said, if you are 5 minutes early to a meeting, you're actually late. So that would make this 10 minutes for everybody. Funny thing is, he actually had a boss that was very serious on that, and it's something that I've always remembered since then. Anyway, enough about that. We're going to jump in and get going. So first off, what we're going to do is we're actually not going to trigger the process and run through it. We're actually going to start in the settings for lease renewals, and then we're going to walk through how I have it set up and some of the options there before we run through a test. So I'm going to come down here in the processes section in the sidebar, hit lease renewals, jump up to the settings, and first off, for every process, the settings obviously follow the same. You're always going to have general, team, staged workflows, your email templates, and custom fields. We're going to cover pieces of all of those as we go through this. But just to start off, in the general tab, it's where you name your process. If you want to have a different name for each individual process, then you can change that in the singular name. good example of that I've seen, people have their work orders process, and then they just call each individual work order WO. So the name of the processes would be WO for property street address 1. Anyway, that's just something to keep in mind. And then regarding contact roles, I want to make that a bit more clear. So what contacts external to your company, so this is like groups of contacts, are involved in this process. So for a lease renewal, it's tenants and owners the vast majority of the time. And I'm also going to cover the ability to have like one-off email templates go to specific people. If you have an insurance agent that needs to get notified or anything like that, I'm going to touch on that a little bit. But these are your contact roles, which are customizable on every single process. So for a work order, for example, you're going to have vendors here as well. So you can add a vendor role, but we don't need that currently in lease renewals. And then we have something called assignee roles, which some of you may use and some of you may not. Basically, assignee roles are great when you have certain tasks that need to be assigned to a particular role because you have multiple people that could fill that role. And I'll show you a little bit of how that works. But leasing agent, you very likely could have 2 of them. Maintenance coordinator, you might have 2. And what this allows you to do is have certain steps in your workflow be assigned to a role, and then whoever is in that role will be assigned to that task. So if Jeannie is the leasing agent and she gets sick, but you also have Rachel as a leasing agent, then you can quickly switch the leasing agent role on a process to Jeannie, or from Jeannie to Rachel, and then all those tasks will get assigned to her if she had to call in sick for some reason or was going to be out for vacation. So that's something you may or may not need. It's really when you have multiple people in your company that fulfill a role, which is like a leasing agent, or if you have multiple people fulfilling accounting role as well. So that's something I just want to cover briefly. We don't use it a ton in this process, but there are a few places where we do. Team, I think you guys all probably pretty familiar with this. It's the same as pipelines, and you can set pretty granular permissions. So Jordan is our CEO, and some of you know him. So I can come in here and remove him, add him to the different process types. So for lease renewals, I just want to cover this really quick. You can set pretty granular permissions on what they're allowed to do within that. So if I wanted to just remove Jordan, I could. I won't, because I'm nice. And now stages and workflows. So this is where we're going to spend most of our time on this call. Again, the goal is to have this 45 minutes or less. So I will be probably moving to questions at least in the 10 to 15 minutes at the end if there are questions. So I might have to go a little bit faster, but obviously the recording everyone's going to be getting at the end, and you'll be able to run through and stop it and rewatch it if that's something you want to do. So lease renewals, actually, I'll just come back to, in this case, what we're doing is we're doing a 90-day lease renewal process. So we're triggering the lease renewals 90 days out. A lot of you trigger 120 days out. It's different based on your region. And so that's something that is totally customizable, but just so you guys know up front, I'm assuming kind of a 90-day trigger point. So we're triggering for the next, so 90 days out is when we're trying to trigger these processes. And that ties into the due dates that I'm setting up as well, which you'll see. Another thing is we didn't have any backlog stages. There's not really any holding stages or backlog for renewals. It's pretty much active once we start. So we don't have any in this case. In property onboarding and other processes, you might have backlog stages, which I talked about on the last webinar. And those basically are, you're resetting the due date out to a certain point and then setting reminders to follow up at that particular date. I think we have that for property onboarding right here on hold. Again, that's a great example of why you would want a backlog stage. But in lease renewals, I don't think that we actually do. You guys can disagree. And if you want to set it up, totally okay. But in my case, I wasn't thinking that was that useful. So the first stage here is upcoming. And again, stage names, all of that's completely customizable. This is an example here. And the first thing that I have it set up to do is right when I create this, we're going to send a owner 90-day notification and a tenant 90-day notification. And those are set to be due 3 months before the due at date. So that's 90 days out from when we set the process to be due. And that is relative due dates. So relative due dates are super cool because you can set tasks to be relative to when the process is due, when it was closed, which is when it was completed, and then any other custom date that you want to add as well. So that's something just to keep in mind in general. And it can get kind of complicated, so you need to think that through, but you can actually base it off of custom dates as well, which you can add in the custom fields here in the sidebar. And we have some custom fields that I've added here, and I'm going to be using them in conditional logic down the way as we go through this. But those are the first two steps. Those go out automatically right away or right when they're due. So we'll be triggering this 90 days out once I run the test, and you'll see that. And then the next thing that I'm doing is I'm triggering an inspection. So the way I have it set up is we have an inspection process, and that's managed by, in this case, as I run through the tests, that's not something that I do. The inspection is managed by somebody else. So I am going to run the test, and as I'm going through, I will trigger the inspection process and assign it to the appropriate person. So we, at this point, after we've had the notifications, we wait for the inspection to be complete, and I'll show you how you can easily see that. So after it's complete, then we will check off that task, and you can see how we have some stop tasks here. It'll make a lot of sense as we run through the test. And then the next question is, hey, did the inspection reveal any necessary repairs? And if it did, then we need to trigger some work orders. So if it didn't, then we just continue. And you'll see how that works in the test. It's pretty cool. So I can trigger as many work orders as I want from that process, and then the status of those work orders would be displayed, and I can assign it to the maintenance team and have it follow that process. So I'm not going to get into detail on the inspection process or the work order process today, but I want to tell you and show you how you can trigger those, have processes trigger other processes, which is pretty cool. So the next thing is we have we need to wait and let those work orders. So we're triggering those. And while we triggered those, you can see that this is not a stop task. We also can definitely do our competitive market analysis on the property and review the tenant's behavior. So those are not stop tasks. So we're going to have all of those. And then determining the new rental rate is our next stop task. And you'll see how that kind of works. After we check off, has the inspection been completed? After we check that off, then tasks from the work orders here that we'll be starting all the way to determining the new rental rate will be scheduled, and you'll see that. So after we determine the new rental rate, we're going to update the estimated rent on the unit, which is something we can easily do in the UI. And so these instructions are basically telling me to do that. After I have done that, and you can have more instructions than that, that's just a brief example. But after I've done that, I'll check off this task and then use the owner rental rate approval template that I wrote, which asks, it's a very brief template here, obviously it can be expanded upon, but it's asking the owner to approve the new rental rate that we've just decided on. And then we ask whether or not the owner approved the rental rate. And this is actually our first custom field that we have. And you can see here that in the details section of the sidebar, we can update this really quickly. And that is a stop task. And what's cool is we actually have conditional logic to tell you which stage to jump to based on whether or not the owner approved. If the owner approves, then we're gonna move to the next owner approved stage. Otherwise, we're gonna move to non-renewal. And if the owner is not renewing, then I'll show you the workflow for that. We're gonna assume that the owner is approved and just keep walking through these stages. All right. So now owner approved, we need to draft the new lease with updated terms. Obviously, your company might be different. You might not need to do a new lease. All your leases might go month to month by default. This again is an example of how you can have it set up. And I guess I've seen this as more common than others that people need to draft a new lease. So you can have detailed instructions on that. I have some here that are just pointing to DocuSign. So basically, draft your new lease in DocuSign if that's what you use. There's lots of different options in that. Another thing I want to note is I will be having, or we will be having, a webinar series in the not too distant future on workflow automation and Zapier and how to trigger some of these things more automatically based on when the stage changes in each different process. And I expect that content to be really useful to all of you as you implement your processes and then want to iterate on it and automate more. Then that's going to be super helpful because you can connect to pretty much any e-signature platform that you use and a bunch of other things that I'll get into in that webinar series. Anyway, that's a side note, little teaser there. So basically, we're going to draft the new lease, stop task. And again, stop tasks, this mean that step must be completed before any of the following steps are scheduled. And then sticky means it's required. So even if I change the stage, then it will always be there. So it requires me to check it off, and then it'll be shown in the activity feed exactly when I checked it off and said that I did it. So basically, we're going to draft a new lease, send it via DocuSign, and then have a new lease agreement notification here with a template, really brief template to the tenant that we send. And it could be automated here. I just have it manual. And yeah, that will be assigned to me. No conditions needed there. But now we have, after that's sent, then one day later, we're going to ask, hey, did the tenant sign the lease? So again, you can set your delays properly here in the left hand of the sidebar. So did the tenant sign the lease? And that is our next custom field that I have. And it's just a multiple choice, and I'll show you that when we run through a test. And basically, we only schedule that task, though, if tenant signed lease is empty. So it's kind of cool. All of the conditional logic fields, you have the option to have is empty or has a value. And then you can basically have steps that request the user to enter data, but you only schedule them if the data is missing. So in this case, I'm only going to schedule it if the lease signed is empty, and you'll see how that works. And then if lease signed is yes, then we should move to the tenant sign stage. If it's not, then we have multiple follow-up steps that occur. And I'll show you how that works. So it will schedule those into the future as well. So now we're going to go to the tenant sign stage. So here we go. We need to have the property manager countersign the new lease. Again, that's different based on each company. And a lot of times with DocuSign, at least, you can set up multiple signers. And so you would have all three people have countersigned. A lot of you use AppFolio and use that trigger, or use AppFolio for e-signature as well. And they send you a notification to countersign the document. So the property manager needs to countersign the document. Some cases, the owner actually needs to countersign. A lot of you don't have that, but I just have a step in here as an example. And then we need to upload the new lease. These are just really standard tasks. Update the lease date in property management software. This is obviously your Propertyware, AppFolio, Rent Manager, Buildium, whatever you're using. Update the rental rate in property management software if it's changed, and then collect the lease renewal fee from the owner. And this could be a template as well. I just didn't add a template here. So yeah, that's really pretty straightforward stage after the tenant is signed. And then we're done, renewal complete. And obviously you guys, there might be more steps and different things, but that's kind of the gist of a lease renewal, covered at least the high level steps and what you can do and set up. So now that's kind of the happy path. That's hopefully what happens. But now we have some of the canceled stages, which have workflow associated with them as well. So I'm just going to keep going here. If the owner doesn't renew, then we can start the management cancel process. which is another process that we have defined. So if they don't renew, then we can trigger another process and have that assigned to whoever is supposed to do that. A lot of times the accounting team handles that, I've seen in companies. So that's up to how you want to have that set up. Then we have tenant non-renewal. And you can see here we have 2 automated notifications, one to the owner and one to the tenants. And it's basically, hey, thanks so much for renting our property, and letting the owner know that the tenant is not renewing. And then we can also trigger a move out process right away as well for the tenant's scheduled move out date, which obviously you might not have right at that exact moment. So you can schedule it into the future and then update the move out process once you have that date. But you can basically start this process at this point, which makes a lot of sense. If the owner wants to relist the property to get a new tenant, then you have to notify the tenant that the owner is going to relist. And that's a template that I have here, which is manual because there might be some other things that you want to add to it, some more details. And then we also need to trigger a move out in this case. And then if the owner wants to sell the property, we're going to have to trigger a move out, and we have a property sale process as well. So what you're seeing here is the processes in LeadSimple are really flexible in how you want to set it up. And as you continue to roll them out in your business, then you can create more. So property sale could become a process if that's something that you want to dive into. And again, this takes time to roll it out. So this won't be on day one, but ultimately there's no reason why you couldn't get here. So that was kind of the last reason why, the last canceled reason. So those are all the canceled workflows if the tenant is not renewing and the workflows associated with that. So it's already 11:22. So I'm going to jump into the actual tenant pipeline and trigger a lease renewal. So that's something we talked about a bit on the last webinar. We were in the tenant pipeline quite a bit, and I basically, for all of you that have Property Management Sync set up, you will have a tenant pipeline, and we are filtering your contract start and end dates for your tenants. And so you can actually use that to filter. And I have a saved view filter here called Renewals, and I've filtered that by 90 days out, which, well, in this case, I want to trigger for August. So all of my leases that are going to end in August is what I want to trigger right here. And I would have done this earlier in the month, but just for the sake of the call, that's what I wanted to say. And you guys can do the same. After you have PM Sync set up and you have your tenants in LeadSimple, then you can do this. A lot of you actually track tenant inquiries as well through LeadSimple. But so you would probably have a filter here based on the stage that tenant is in, or actually I would probably make it on status because then you can just have all of the current WAN tenants so they aren't passed. And I'm gonna save that, override my view. So now this would be more accurate to what you guys would have set up in your account. So I'm going to jump in here to John Smith. So you can see we just have 2 renewals. Obviously, you guys likely have more than that, but for the sake of example, you can jump in here to John Smith. This is a deal. He's moved in. Is a stage he's in, but we're triggering our renewal process. So I jump down here to the sidebar, trigger lease renewal. And you can see here it pulls in the property, automatically pulls in the owners and the tenant, which is John Smith, which is that deal that we're currently looking at. Automatically names it Renewal for property street address 1 and assigns it to me. Obviously, I could assign it to someone else if that is something that you want to have happen at that point. And then it starts it in the upcoming stage, which is the first active stage. I don't have any comments, so I'm just going to trigger this process. And you can see here, we get our first 2 automated emails that are scheduled to go out. And one thing I forgot to do was to set the due date. So I'm going to update that to August 1st. And you can see because these are all relative to the due date, they actually update it automatically. So if you ever forget to change the relative date that you're messing with or basing your workflow off of, once you update it, then it will adjust the tasks. So you can see that these are backdated to Sunday, and that's something that I wanted to I could cover as well. Is the workflow hours, which is something that I didn't set up on this process, but I would, because obviously those got scheduled for Sunday. So you can actually schedule your workflow hours for when you want automated emails to be sent. And that's something that you can set up here. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I wanted to mention that as well for anyone that didn't know it was here. For every single stage, you can have different workflow hours. All right. Now, those are going to get sent because they're already due in the past, because I would have triggered these lease renewals earlier in the month, since we're already a little bit into it. So those are going to get sent out, and then we're supposed to create the inspection process. So I'm going to trigger the inspection process, and I'm going to assign it to Jordan because he doesn't do any work around here, as all of you know. He's our CEO, for anyone that doesn't know. And that was a joke. All right, so I triggered this, and it's assigned to him, and this is an inspection process. We're not going to get into it, but I just wanted to show you how this would work, how processes trigger other processes. Now I'm jumping back. You can see that those automated emails have already been sent right here. LeadSimple auto sent, both of those, and they'll be sent via your connected email account, which all of you should have your email accounts connected, so we can send directly as you. If you don't, then I very much encourage you to do that. And I can have Matthew include that in the follow-up to make sure if you don't have a connected email account that you do that. So, and again, I'm gonna get to questions here at the end. So if you have any, then feel free to throw them in the Ask a Question section at the bottom of, I think, the webinar. All right, so now I'm back at the lease renewal, and you can see here that there's an inspection that is outstanding. And currently the way we have the process set up is we need to wait until that's completed. So I'm actually, and obviously that could be different for your company, but I'm just going to pretend the inspection is complete. So I'm just going to jump, say, yay, complete it for Jordan. But you can see it says who actually did it in the activity feed. So if anyone does something on your process that's assigned to you, it will be tracked as them. So they're not going to be able to pretend to be you and do anything. That's just a side note. So now I can jump back, and in the sidebar, yep, I can see the inspection has been completed. So Jordan actually did his job, and I can check that off. And now all those tasks that I talked about earlier, they all got scheduled down to the next stop task, and pretty standard here. So did the inspection reveal any necessary repairs? Create work orders if so. I'm going to say, yeah, we did have, let's say, a toilet repair that needed to be done. So I'm triggering a work order. Again, it automatically pulled in the owners and the tenants. I don't know which vendor we're going to use, so I'm not going to add that yet. And I'm actually going to assign this to Amy, but obviously you assign it to whoever would handle managing your work orders. And then it starts in its own stage. We're not going to get into work orders today. That's a separate webinar at some point, but that's assigned to Amy, and it'll be tracked under the renewal in the sidebar for sub processes. And I'm just going to say that it's completed as well, so that we can continue to move forward with our process and enjoy the confetti every time. So now we can see here under sub processes that work order has been complete. Another thing I wanted to mention as well, as you're doing day-to-day, you're running around, you're working with stuff, if you want to check in on a property and be like, hey, where are the processes and how are they going, then this is a quick search. If you want to just search for properties and not start by searching for leads, then you can do P:, and then I'm just going to put in Freeman. So we're going to look up the North Pole. So you can see here how it loaded the property tab first because I had the P:, and you can do the same for contacts. If you just want to search contacts, you can do C:. If you just want to search leads, you can do L:, and if you want to search processes, you can do PR. That's just a note to all of you. It's kind of a pro tip. All right, so now you can see here on this property, we can see the work orders. And so the work order was completed and the inspection's completed. The lease renewal is still outstanding, signed to me. So you can check in on that on the property page. This is what the detail page of the property looks like. Now I'm going to say, yep, work order's been completed. Cool. Run the competitive market analysis. So I'm going to say, yep, I've done that. Again, these steps will reflect more of your process. What I have here is an example. So all of this is adjustable. So then you review the tenant's rental behavior, determine any lease changes if that's something that you want to do, and then determine the new rental rate. So I'm going to say, all right, 37, that's what it was previously with all that information I've already collected, and whatever your process is for determining the new rental rate. In this case, I'm just going to say we're going to bump it to $39.95. And that's pretty inexpensive for the North Pole. If you understand, 24 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, 12,000 square feet. I think that's a pretty good deal. And so now we've updated that, and I hit refresh on the instructions, and it refreshes that data in the instructions. Again, this is really not super in-depth instructions, but if you had more detailed instructions as an admin, I can actually edit them here for the template. Only admins can do this. But if I wanted to add more instructions, can't even type, then you can do that. And then you can see here that it will be saved for any process that has this outstanding task. So now that I've done that, I'm going to check that off. So we've determined the new rental rate. Now we got to ask the owner. So I'm going to ask the owner. This is the template I have written here. Again, it's a really short template. You'd have more likely. And now it auto loads the next task, which is, hey, did the owner approve the new rental rate? So I hit edit over here. I'm going to say, yes, they approved. And what's super cool is based on conditional logic, it completed that task and tells me exactly what to do next, which is make sure I move to owner approved. So I do that. Gets rid of that task and now adds the first task in the owner approved workflow, which is drafting the new lease. So in this case, I'm going to go do that, send it via DocuSign. And here what's cool is we're actually able to print out all the tenant information. If you want to print out owner information and more instructions on how to add that in DocuSign or whatever signature, whatever your lease signing drafting process is, you can have really detailed instructions here. So let's say I sent that via DocuSign, which again, we're going to have a webinar series on Zapier at some point, which would include a lot of cool stuff around making that more automatic. So do that. And then this is a notification that probably could be automated, but I made it manual to just notify John, our tenant, that he should take a look at that DocuSign email. And now the next task is scheduled for a day later. So it's a day from now. And did the tenant sign the lease? I'm on PST if you guys are all wondering why it's 11:33, because it is here. And now it's saying, hey, set the lease signed field on the process. All right. I'm going to say, nope, they haven't done it yet. And obviously I'm doing that task early. And now it's asking me, hey, make sure you follow up with the tenant again. So I'm going to send that tenant another email. Boom, did that. Now did the tenant sign the lease this time? And that's scheduled for a day from now as well. And I'm going to say, yes, sweet, they have signed. And now we can move to the tenant signed stage. And you can see how these tasks are automatically adjusting and reloading based on the data I enter, which is super cool. So, and that's based on the conditional logic I had set up that I showed you. So now we need to have a licensed property manager countersign. Obviously, your steps might be different at this point, as well as your stages could be different too. This is an example of a lease renewal process and how it could work to help you guys grasp it and grasp what's possible, but your steps might be different. All right, so we check that off, send the new lease to the owner of the countersign. Probably if I just done it through DocuSign, I would have done that at the same time, but sometimes the owner does have to countersign, other times it doesn't, so I just have that step in here. Check that off. Upload the new lease to the tenant property records. These are really standard tasks, just uploading taking care of making sure the lease is where it needs to be and the dates and stuff have been updated. So these tasks would reflect your process. And then we would collect the owner lease renewal fee, and this could be a template as well. Another thing always to note is if you want to use a template on a task, or if you ever want to add a task with a template, you can always add manual tasks and grab a template. And if you don't have one yet, you can always create one, and you can do that all from the process page, which is pretty cool. So if I wanted to add just a one-off email task, then I can do that really easily here. And obviously I don't want to do that, so I'm going to delete that and say that I did. So cool. Now we've done that, and this stage was set up to automatically move me to renewal complete, which is yay, we're done. So that's kind of the happy path, obviously, for a lease renewal. And there was a lot that we covered there. We're at 11:36 here, so I'm just going to quickly run through the lost stages and then cover any questions you guys have. Anything we can't cover, we'll try to answer in the follow-up email as well. So don't worry about that. All right. So we're done. Sweet. Renewals finished. You can actually see that again on the property page here. So renewals complete. We completed on May 7th and it's due on August 1st. I say that's pretty awesome. Also very unlikely. So I want to walk through the other, if the other canceled stages that could have happened along the way. Owner non-renewal. So the owner would have told us. He wouldn't have not approved the owner rate and said, hey, I want to not renew. We would have moved to owner non-renewal, which means we would start the management cancel process. If the tenant is not interested in renewing, then we would have the 2 automated emails get sent out right when we move to that stage, and then we would create the move out process, which I could trigger here. And then if we had the owner that wants to relist his property, then we got to let the tenant know that they need to move out, and then trigger move out. And then if the owner is selling the property, then we can create the move out process and create the property sale process. So that's kind of just showing you how everything can get triggered from one to the next. And I just moved back to renewal complete because I love confetti. Okay, now I want to move to your questions. That was a lot, I know, for everybody, and I probably was drinking more from a fire hose than I wanted to. But if you guys do have any questions, feel free to pipe up now. Otherwise, we can wrap up class a little early, which isn't a bad thing either. So I'm going to wait, see if you guys have any other questions. I'm trying to think if I didn't make sure I covered the things I wanted to touch on. Oh, yeah, one that I did want to touch on that I didn't specifically say is the custom to address on email templates. So you can actually, let's say if you wanted to notify an insurance agent, in the lease renewals, I'm not sure exactly when, if you would want to do that. You probably don't need to. But let's say you did want to notify just some person outside the company, you don't want a contact role for it. You can add an email step, attach a template. So I'm just going to add so we'll just do insurance, can't spell, notification. And then I can click here and do a custom to address. So this template will always and only send to that address, and then I can incorporate into the workflow. Insurance update for property.street. And that will put the street in it and be like, hi, Bob. If Bob's your insurance agent, and you can tell him everything that you want and print out. And basically that can be a template that will only send to Bob. And that allows you to have external notifications to individuals, or you can have even internal notifications to the team. If you want an email to go out, let's say on the owner onboarding process, once you reach completion, you might want, you can see here, it's sending to a custom recipient, not any of the contact roles. But if you wanted to notify the team, hey, we onboarded a new property, then you can set up a custom email template to do that and make it more of a celebration. that would be actually something that you could easily do in the final stage of the renewal complete. We could easily add an email here that's automated that just goes to the team members on the renewal team or just your entire team to let them know, hey, we just had a renewal that was successful. Just lots of different ways you can use that, but I wanted to cover that as well. So now we're running up on time. I'm not getting any questions, so it's a quiet group today, which is totally fine. Matthew looks like he's answered quite a few of the questions or the questions that came up in chat. So thanks, Matthew, for handling that. And again, this recording is going to be available. All right, now we got one. Is there a master dashboard or screen that shows all upcoming renewals with pending steps, stages remaining? Yes. Okay, so I didn't really cover that. But yes, there's a dashboard here. So for all your different process types, you have a dashboard. And I also don't think it's going to be long before we have an all roll-up view for all your processes as well. I would expect that to come at some point in the near future as well. But for all your lease renewals, I can see all of them that are outstanding. Obviously, there's just one here. We have more in the different processes that we have, like property onboarding. I can look at, and these are save view filters that I have up here. So you can customize the filters as well as the columns that you want to see. So I can look at all the ones that are overdue. And the on track filter is basically, there's three different options. It will be overdue, which means the process is overdue totally. It will be off track. It will be orange if you have tasks that are overdue, just tasks, but the process currently isn't overdue. And then it will be completed, and it will show when it was completed and when it was due. If it was completed after it was due, then this would be red. So that's something to keep in mind. But yes, you have a customizable, filterable dashboard. Another filter that you should very much know about is assign to me. So let's say if Matthew or Amy were looking at this, they would only see their processes that are in property onboarding, and I will only see mine under this view. So it's kind of a cool view in that regard. So I hope that answers your question. So you're able to see the stage, and you can customize the columns as well. If you have any custom data you want to see as well, then all of those columns are here, and you're able to put them and drag them around on the dashboard. And then you're able to save those in Save View tabs up here. I'll have Matthew include a link to how to set up your save views and filters and make this dashboard really usable. I already showed you on tenants how I did that for renewals. So this is a saved view with these save filters, so I can always jump back and forth between them, and it saves it for me. So I'll have him include that in the follow-up. All right. Just about up on time. I want to thank everybody so much for coming. Again, I'm Zach with LeadSimple. We're going to have more webinars like this in the future. The next one you guys will get an invite for, and you can choose to come on if you want to listen to me talk again or not. And we'll be continuing to go on deep dives on different processes, show what's possible, as well as I mentioned, obviously, Zapier, a series on that, and automating more of your process down the road. So thanks so much again for getting on. This recording will be available at this exact URL. We'll include it in our follow-up email as well, and it will be posted on the blog shortly. So you'll have access to that. If you want to share it around, then feel free to do that. Okay, well, thanks so much again, and we'll be seeing you guys around. Hope you all stay safe. Okay, bye.